Welcome to the WellCast. The world has a lot to say. We're bringing a biblical perspective to those conversations.
Welcome to another episode of the WellCast. I am Mike Sirasoni, and I'm joined for this episode by Brynn, McIlhatton, and Yoshikawa. You know them from our last episode and also from the StudentCast. Yeah. So if you haven't heard of the StudentCast, you probably didn't listen to our last episode. You should go check that out. But they are they're doing a podcast, and the students are loving it, parents are loving it, and we love that you guys are here with us. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, we're stoked. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Well, I think we all know what it's like to be in those friendships where you're kind of part of a group of friends, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere,
you don't get the invite.
That's tough.
And there could be a million reasons why, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But it's like an arrow to the heart.
Totally.
It's crushing.
There's actually a term for that in the students world.
Yeah. So you guys did an episode on this, and I was like, that's so good. We actually have to do an episode for grown-ups.
Yeah.
Or adults. And so you're gonna have to.
Do I fall in that category yet?
Yeah, barely. You're barely there. But you're going to have to define kind of this term. I use it all the time, and I know what it stands for, but you're going to have to help me out with a little bit of the language. So the episode is on FOMO.
FOMO. Yeah.
But what does that mean?
So it means fear of missing out. And if you've ever listened to the StudentCast, we tend to like to ask our guy, Merriam-Webster.
Yes,
Merriam-Webster. Sounds
Merriam-Webster.
Like a fantastic dude.
Yeah,
Honestly,
awesome guy.
He's really brilliant.
Yeah. He sounds a bit talkative, though.
Yeah, we like to ask our guy, Merriam-Webster, what he has to say about these terms. And he defines fear of missing out as the fear of not being included in something, such as an interesting or enjoyable activity that others are experiencing. So
it's like you're reading my mail.
Yeah.
Like I have FOMO all the time. Like I want, if it's, what did you say? Interesting or
enjoyable activity.
Those are the activities I like the most.
Well, I hope so. They're enjoyable.
I love those activities the most, and I hate being left out from them. But, when we talk about fear of missing out, really what we're talking about is the ugly kind of monster of jealousy, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, where we're like, we become like insecure because we're like, wait, we're not part of what you guys are doing. So is there something wrong with me?
Yeah.
That's not a fun question.
No,
it's actually crushing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a friend group one time. It was literally just because like they were just like going through the group chat and they just forgot to like add me in, just naturally forgot. But as soon as I saw everyone else hanging out and I wasn't there because they posted on their Insta story, I was like, wait, what about me?
Yeah.
Like why'd you guys do that? I love to go eat ampersand ice cream and I'm not there for some reason. And so I literally spiraled and being like, oh my gosh, maybe they don't actually like me and they only invite me because like out of pity, you know? It just sent me on a spiral.
Oh.
That's
hard.
It's hard. Yeah. I think but I don't think KAO's alone.
No.
Like we've all had those situations and it really does, I think we identified jealousy, right? And we'll talk more about jealousy in a little bit and but we also have to identify the insecurity side of it.
Oh yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So we start. We are so good. It's like Mad Libs.
Yes.
Like we do Mad Libs with our lives, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's like, hey, they're out, without us, and so I need an adjective. You're terrible.
Yeah.
Like,
That's such a good illustration.
Yes.
I feel like we start writing this whole other narrative that no one else said.
Yeah.
It's just our own negative thought spirals. But I think when we'll see like friends that are hanging out without us, it's immediately like what KO is saying. It's something wrong with me. And we write a whole story on our own without our friends even ever having a chance to speak into that.
Yeah.
Well, and you guys don't know this because you're much younger than me. So there was a time. And I never.
How much younger?
I never thought I would be the one saying this because I used to be like the one that's like, you're so much older than me. And now I'm saying you're so much younger than me. But there was a time, and our listeners will remember. Your listeners won't remember.
Yes.
Well, maybe their parents. But there was a time where you could hang out with whoever you wanted and nobody knew.
We did make a joke on ours.
We
that
said, okay, boomers.
It was like when the horse drunk.
Okay, it's not quite that bad.
I'm kidding.
Now I think Brynn thinks I was around before there was electricity.
Yeah, we like wish we could go back to that time
Yeah.
when your life wasn't necessarily blasted for everyone to know, and then it's like you could just hang out with people and it didn't cause drama.
Okay,
Yeah.
so quick story. It
Yeah.
doesn't really have. It just goes to show like the era that I grew up in. So I liked this girl, and she would call me. I was in like probably 6th grade, and she would call me and she would want to talk, and I got on the phone, and then all of a sudden I heard this little click on the line.
Merging calls.
No,
Oh.
before that even.
Oh.
My brother had picked up the phone in the other room, and he was trying to listen to our conversation because we didn't have cell phones back then. So it was landlines, and all the landlines in the house were tied into the same line. So you could literally pick up the phone and listen to somebody else's conversation.
I used to do that to my mom.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You had a landline?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. I mean, that actually makes me feel a whole lot less old, so I appreciate that. Did you ever have a landline?
I mean, I had a landline in Hawaii, but I don't.
Well, I don't know if it was a landline. It was just a house phone.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that
the
a
same
landline?
thing. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the old people way of saying house
House
phone.
phones. There's one in Hawaii, but like I didn't do the listen.
But that's the point I'm trying to make. So
We always want to know, like, we want to be a part of everything.
Yeah,
We want to
and-
insert ourselves in everything.
And I think also like we didn't have Instagram on our phones.
Yes.
Like it was way later when like Friendster and MySpace came out, where now you're all of a sudden. I didn't have Friendster, so just so you know,
okay.
I didn't. But MySpace, like all of a sudden you're able to you get direct access into people's lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's turned into something that's really detrimental. Tell me, I'm for the parents listening, or even some of the high school students, I know they tune in. Why is social media such a tragedy when it comes to this topic of FOMO?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly connected, so therefore we're constantly showing people what our lives are. And then it's just twofold. Number one, we feel like we have to post, or say we, because we're part of this
Yeah.
group. But
Yeah,
we
me
feel like,
too. I have old people Instagram.
yeah, like we have to post because it's like, well, am I actually, like, I want people to know that I'm living my life,
Yeah.
or like, what am I doing?
I want people to think I'm having fun.
Yeah, and I want them to like react to the stuff I'm doing, you know?
Like,
And,
dang, Brynn's life is cool.
yeah, like I want that. And then also the side effect is then now all we're doing is we're just showing people all the good stuff that's happening in our lives, and
and
we're
like
comparing.
cultivating this like image for people to see that's good.
So like in a way, you're saying you view your social media as a way to give other people FOMO.
I mean, sure.
Yeah, I guess I'm like indirectly. Yes, yeah,
That's not like
indirectly.
the goal there. But
Yeah.
yeah, you want to look like you have a good time. But I think also one of the social media things that came up while you were talking that I was thinking of is there's literally, for student context, there's an app called Be Real now, where at any point throughout the day, a notification will come up and you have 2 minutes to like post a picture of whatever you're doing. So like it takes a
I've seen
picture of
it.
like a selfie and the,
yeah.
what's
Yeah, just the front.
outward
Yeah.
front picture. And they do it right then on the spot. And so literally, like, if you're hanging out with friends right in that moment, it's like, oh, my Be Real is cooler than the person's who
was just chilling
was
at
just
home.
sitting at the couch on their cell.
Yeah.
Like you're at the top of like a Ferris wheel, and you're like, yes,
Yes.
I'm so glad this is the time. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't have that app.
I just got it.
Oh,
Same, we downloaded it to connect with our students.
wow.
Yeah, but
I
it's
remember
definitely-
doing that.
It can. The whole point was the heart behind it was for authenticity, to just
Yeah.
show up, because like Instagram is curated at this point.
Yeah.
And then but what's happening is then now it's like it's in live,
Mm-hmm.
and so when you see that your friends are hanging out and you're the one that's on the like on the couch, it's like, well, what about me?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we start getting jealous, being like, well, like, what about their friends what about them that makes them better than me? And I wish I could be there or doing what they're doing, you
Yeah.
know?
And we talked about this on the last episode with fear of failure, but I think it goes back to, again, we're always comparing our lonely moments or our hard times to everyone else's highlight reel that they're putting out there. And I put out my own highlight reel. Like, I totally am guilty of that.
It's so interesting too, because we will make other people's lives about us.
Yeah.
You know?
You will.
Like
Yeah.
we have as humans, and I say this as humans, right? I think we all, everyone listening can relate to this. We make other people's lives about us.
Yeah.
Because everything's about us. Like
We're the main character in the story
Absolutely.
in our
in
minds.
the story of everyone's life.
Yeah.
Like everyone's life is a different movie, and we're starring in all of them.
Yeah.
And so it's like we Mad Libs it up, and we just say, look, their story's about me, and if I'm not at the center of their story, I must not be good enough.
Yeah.
It's like, well, maybe maybe you didn't pop into their head.
Yeah.
Or
And
maybe they were walking through Target and they saw this friend, this couple or whatever, and they're like, hey, let's get dinner later.
Yeah.
Well, that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, totally.
But we make it about ourselves, and we start to write the whole narrative of, well, I'm not fun, or I'm not outgoing enough, or they think I'm stupid. You know, all these things. Like we start writing this narrative when all along it's just the chance encounter at a Target that led to it. And so I think it's important for us to hear it's not about us.
And it's a negative interpretation of ourselves instead of a positive interpretation of the person they're hanging out with. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm not fun, instead of being like, oh, like that person they're hanging out with is really fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm not. But I think, again, it's just all about ourselves.
Yeah, and it's just a point where like our friends get to have lives outside of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I mean, like they get to. That's their prerogative, and so for
Yeah.
us to dictate that we have to be a part of all of it is just kind of very selfish.
Well, and it shows unhealth, right? I mean, if we have a healthy view of ourselves, then we don't get insecure when other people are hanging out without us.
Yeah.
Because we recognize, like, I'm actually a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And people. It's like that. Gosh darn it, people like me. You know, that feeling of like you have to.
funny.
If you have a healthy view of yourself, then what other people do doesn't have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
Well, and if you have a healthy view of like your friends in your life, I think a lot of times where a lot of the insecurity can come from is if your friends are in a place in your life where like the Lord should be. It's like, oh, well, like my all, or like all of my worth is placed in how much we hang out, what those interactions are like. And so, yeah, when you're hanging out with someone else without me, my whole identity and worth is being attacked in that moment.
Yeah, because that person is the most important, or that friend group is the most important part of who you are.
Yeah. Well, then it's okay. So, like, then I have to ask the question because then we talk about a lot about being a biblical community and having friends. So then, how do we have that balance of like, they are like my people, but also they're not in the place of idols, like where God should be? Like, how do we, wrestle with that? Like, how do we keep them like that? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
It does, and I think as we process that question, one of the things that comes to mind for me is, you know how tiring it would be if I had to remember everybody that wanted to hang out every time I invited anybody to do anything.
Yeah.
Like
Exhausting.
Yeah,
It's hard.
And like sometimes it's just like it's the ease of hanging out with someone. They live down the street, or your kids are in the same age bracket. It's not always about like, I need to go down my phone and invite everyone who's connected to these people. Like sometimes it feels like that, but it's not right. And so I forgot your question, to be honest.
Yeah, don't worry. I was just like, we have to ask the question then like community is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so then how do we make sure that like community is still like something that we're a part of, but also it doesn't move into God? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does make sense. I mean, I think it's just a constant like check on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Like having people also check in on that with us. Like I feel like one of my mentors, like frequent questions with me is like, okay, like who's number one in your life right now? Jesus, or is it a person?
Yeah.
And so I think having that, or like things in place to check in on us with that is good.
That's good. Yeah.
I think we also have to identify the elephant in the room, that we're all extroverts. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're kind of ambivert.
Yeah, I'm kind of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, Brynn and I are extroverted.
I'm a people person.
Yeah, and so I think we are more susceptible to this than like Kristen never gets that way.
Yeah.
Like, she's introverted, and she's like, I'm glad I'm not there.
Yeah.
Not really, but
my mom growing up would always be like, I'm so glad I wasn't invited to that because I didn't have to say no. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't relate to that.
sorry, Ann.
Sorry, Mom. My bad.
But it's so true. There are some people who don't experience this, and so this is an extroverted problem in general. But I think to answer your question, I think we have to. And Brynn said it, maybe just saying it a slightly different way. we just have to have an accurate picture of who our hope is in.
Yeah.
And where we find value and worth.
That's true. Well, even like, I hear you. I think we can say it is definitely an extroverted issue, probably more, but I would even say for those who are listening who are maybe like, yeah, people aren't my thing all the time, we might have a fear of missing out as far as like seasons.
For sure.
Like, I'm not in that season that you're in, and now I'm jealous of that. You know what I mean? And so that can still affect people.
Yeah, because
too.
it's not just relationships.
Yeah,
right?
no.
Fear of missing out is anything that's appealing to you, right? Anything somebody else is doing that's appealing to you.
Yeah.
You know what that's called? Coveting.
Preach.
I mean, it is.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why the Bible warns against it, because it deteriorates our worth and our value. And so it's just interesting. It's interesting when all of these, I find it so interesting. Well, I said interesting like 7 times there.
No, because it is interesting.
But also affirming that in every instance in my life, sin is destructive. You know, God's word says, don't do this. You do it, and then it's bad.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things, like coveting in general. Like, and you said, you talked about it being like life stage, right? But it's more than that. So I don't think my sister would mind me telling this story, but she is 6 years younger than me. And I think she is more... she's more apt to compare herself to where I am, even though I'm 6 years older. And I think we do that all the time, right? So kids growing up, they look at what their parents have. Yeah. And they want to be where their parents are when their parents are 60, even though they're 30. Yeah. You know, and it's just one of those things. So coveting is something that really, really can deteriorate from our quality of life.
Yeah. Well, that's something I was going to ask you guys is I feel like in the season of life I'm in, it's like the season of life thing you're talking about is like, oh, fear of missing out on relationships. Like everyone's like dating someone or they're getting married, getting engaged. And it's like, okay, they're moving on to this next season and we're probably not going to talk much anymore. And then I feel like after that, then it's like, oh, well, those friends are having babies. And so then I feel like there's always a next step. But has there been a time in your guys' life where you feel like you're missing out on a season that your friends are in? Or like you miss out on relationships because you're not in the same season as them?
Yeah, well, for me, while like my friend group was like me and Cassie were the first to get married in our friend group, we are the last to have kids. And so like often our friends are always talking about their kiddos or like, you know, T-ball or whatever, all the things that go with that. And then I'm always telling Cassie, like, is there something wrong with us? Because we're not in that stage. And, or like, wow, like we don't feel like we can't relate, you know, as much. So then we almost feel like we are not part of it. Yeah. And then on a bad day, I covet that, like their stage of life, not recognizing that like there's actually contentment that I should be in with the season and like life stage and like the ability that I have currently and what I have, like the Lord's allowed. But I'm always focusing on like what they have. Yeah. I'm not recognizing and appreciating what I have. Yeah. And so that happens a lot. Like even sometimes like even now where like my friends who do have kids or have another kiddo, when we hang out, like sometimes I'm always like you had to have another kid.
Sorry.
Like I just figured out how to be friends with you when you had one kid. Now you have 2. I don't know what to do now, you know?
They're even louder. They're all crying all the time.
I feel like I don't get you. So then I get jealous of like the fact that like whatever their life stage is. And I feel like the only way for me to be their friends or to hang out with them is I had to have like a kid. Yeah. You know?
Is it hard? Cause like, I don't know. I feel like from an outside, like looking in, it'd be like, oh, well, all these couples who have kids will hang out because all their kids are having a play date. And like, has that been hard because you might not get the invite in those cases?
Yeah, I don't get it. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll just go hang out with all my friends who don't have kids, you know?
Yeah. I think for me, something I would tell you too, and all of our listeners that are younger, is there comes a point in your life where it shifts. So like you guys are coveting things in the future. And there are times in my life where I covet things in the past. So I look at you, you know, Brynn, you're 22 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. You don't know who you're going to marry. You don't know how many kids you're going to have or if you're going to choose to have kids at all. You don't know, you know, you don't even know what 24 looks like, you know? I mean, and I think it's so easy for, as you get into the midlife stage of your life, which unfortunately I find myself in. I keep trying to deny it, but it's there. I'm gonna be 40 next year. And you find yourself looking back. And Kristen and I are watching this show right now. It was shot in like the 90s. And it brings back so much nostalgia to my life that I'm like, oh, I remember high school.
Yeah.
I remember the fun. I remember being 22 and being able to and so if you're not careful, you start to be, because really what we're talking about is not being present.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be someplace you're not. So for me, it's I would like to be in the early 2000s again, graduating high school, which I really don't want to be honest. Like I love where I'm at, but it's easy to miss certain things. Competitive sports for me, or when I was 22, I was playing baseball, like college baseball. It was fun. I miss those things, but realistically, coveting, or this idea of FOMO, maybe more specifically, is wanting to be a different place than you are right now.
Yeah, I think that's really I don't know, nail on the forehead.
Yeah.
Is that the phrase?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think.
think it
nail on the head.
Yes.
Ask Jordan when he comes back. I mess this up all the time.
That's the nail on the forehead. I mean, it's.
I'm dead right now.
That would kill somebody.
Okay, but I think I can't. But I think that is what we're talking about, is that idea.
Would you say that hit the nail on the head?
Yeah, I would say
good.
that. I'm turning red. But I think that idea of not being present, I don't know, is robbing you of joy, that even when you're seeing your friends that are hanging out without you, maybe you were actually doing something pretty cool in that moment with different friends, but you're seeing other friends hanging out or doing something else rob you of the joy that is in that current circumstance.
That's real.
And I think, that last statement, maybe even so much more than the nail on the forehead statement, that was so important for people to hear. That jealousy and bitterness and insecurities and all of these things that God warns us against in his word, they rob us of joy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what's amazing is, if we think about why Jesus came, right? What did he say? He said he came so that we would have life
And life abundant.
and life abundant.
Mm-hmm.
And that abundant life means he wants joy for us.
Yeah.
He wants us to thrive in the present. And maybe I'm reading John Mark Comer's Live No Lies right now.
We love it.
It's such a good book, and he does such a good job of hitting the nail on the forehead. And he
Never gonna live that one
No,
down.
unfortunately, it's kind of,
But Satan is the father of lies. And
Yeah.
he wants you to believe that what you're not doing is better than what you're doing.
Totally.
And that's just not true.
it's not.
Yeah.
Because when I'm not hanging out with friends, I'm hanging out with my kids.
Yeah.
I'm hanging out with my wife.
Yeah.
I can do really, and you know what? They should have FOMO because of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
This is an amazing thing, but it's the human condition.
Yeah.
We focus on the negative. I call it the tyranny of the negatives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
focus.
say that more. What does that mean?
The tyranny of the negatives. We can have all these incredible blessings, right? We can have kids and a wife and a house and a pool and God has. I think everyone at this table knows God has poured out his blessings on our lives. And I would say everybody who's listening
Absolutely.
could say the same thing, despite whatever circumstance they're in. But the tyranny of the negative says we have one or two bad things in our life, and that takes precedent over everything else. That is the definition of robbing us of joy.
Yeah.
And so the tyranny of the negative is you're not with your friends. That's great. Like we all have good friends. Like I want to be with them. I have fun. If they're, hanging out camping and I'm not there, I'm like, well, I would want to be there. But the tyranny of the negative says that's the most important thing instead of where God has you right now.
Yeah.
That's
real.
good. That's so good.
All right. Well, so we're hearing here's kind of where we're at. We kind of found the root. It's just jealousy or us not being present.
Yeah.
And so for the listeners who are listening or on their way to work or things like that, okay, cool. I find myself there. I identify.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for you guys, what would you find are some things that kind of help you get yourself out of that rut or out of that negative thinking, or even just helping you recognize that the present, your jealousy is robbing you from the present? What would you say to our listeners on okay, this is how we switch it up,
Yeah. I think I confess it.
Well, what do you mean by that?
So let me tell you,
Because I like that. I mean, yeah.
I think we're all gonna feel this. So the goal is, if the goal is to never feel FOMO, you're gonna be defeated, right? It's. I think the goal is when you do feel it, to give it away. And so Kristen's been the greatest asset in my life around this, because I am a big FOMO guy.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm missing out on everything. I'm very relational, and I think Kristen would tell you, like, there's times where we probably should go out on a date, just the two of us, and I'm like, the more the merrier. Like, let's just invite everybody. And she's like, well, I really want to connect with you.
Yeah.
And so we've had to learn how to navigate that. But I think, as I think about this, I just tell her, like, hey, these people are hanging out, and it really is affecting me. Because I honestly, I told you guys before we recorded, I'm the guy that leaves like a party or a hangout time, and I'm like, I was too much. Like, they probably really are glad I'm gone. And I'll just tell her that, and she'll speak truth into me.
Yeah.
We need to have people in our lives that speak truth into us. When we confess lies, we have to have people who are willing to go, that's a lie.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's not true. And the people who are closest to us are often the best to do that.
Yeah. I think something that comes to my mind too in like combating FOMO, and this is like, I don't know, pretty in the weeds, but I think that if you are constantly kind of like passively waiting for all your friends to pursue you, then you're going to be pretty disappointed.
Yeah, that's
like,
good.
I think there's times where we can so like run with this Mad Libs thing that you were talking about earlier, where it's like, I've written the story that no one wants to hang out with me and no one's reaching out to me because no one cares about me or no one sees me. But like, everyone has that narrative in their head at some point. And so I think we can pursue relationships too. Like, I can reach out to a friend and be like, hey, I want to spend time with you. Like, can we get coffee? And so I think just kind of like being more active in pursuing relationships too, instead of just waiting for everyone to pursue us, helps with that.
That's so good. Why do we always write the negatives? Like, we always write negative stories.
There's positive ones. Yeah.
Like we could write a positive story.
Totally.
Like we could tell a positive narrative about why we're not there, but we default to negatives. It's like it's just our nature.
Yeah. And even if it's not negative against ourselves, it's negative against them. Like, they'd be having so much more fun if I was there. We're like,
they must be having the worst time ever.
They don't even like each other that much.
Yeah, they might have Cold Stone ice cream, but they don't have Cold Stone ice cream with me.
Yeah, exactly. Probably it's easier for us to believe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Negativity is easier for us to believe for some reason.
Yeah. What do you think, Kayo? How do you battle that? I mean, I think you're a relational guy as well. Like, what does that look like for you?
I think for me, when like I see other people hanging out, I agree. I confess. I'm honest. I am very much so like, what about me and why am I not invited? And then I just have to, and it's just easier for me to do that. And rarely am I thinking, wow, I'm so glad that they found, like, they have community too outside of me.
Yeah.
And so I'll be honest, I'm often, I just recently started doing this. So this is weird. If Jordan was here, we'd give him credit. So, but we'll still give him credit even though he's not here.
All right.
He says, sometimes you gotta say things that you don't want to say.
Say the thing you feel like you shouldn't.
Yes. And so sometimes I just tell my friends, like, hey, like, this is awkward for me, but like, I really wish that I was invited to that thing. And maybe you just didn't invite because you didn't think about it. It's not about you. I'm just telling you, next time that happens, I'd love to come with you guys. And then they're normally like, okay, I actually was like trying to protect your rest.
Yeah.
Like, I was actually doing it for you, and I didn't invite you because I didn't want you to feel like you had to.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, thanks for thinking of me. I don't know why I thought like you were just doing it to exclude me, you know?
Or like you post a picture of you and Cassie on a date night.
Yeah.
And then you see them hanging out and you're like, why didn't they invite me? Well, they saw your picture.
Exactly.
Like there's always another explanation than you're the worst person on the planet.
Yeah. So
that goes further than just FOMO, but I think asking a simple question sometimes can stop a very long spiral for us.
Yeah.
Like, hey, why wasn't I there?
Yeah.
Are we okay?
Yeah.
And then they're like, yeah, we're fine. And you're like, oh, all right.
we're great.
I got to trust that. But I don't know.
I think the other thing is, we talked about FOMO in relationships, but we also talked about FOMO in life stages.
Yeah.
And I think that's a picture into our hearts of whether or not we trust God with the present.
That's real.
Like, do we trust God with where he has us? And so if you're listening and you are experiencing FOMO because you're not where you want to be, just remember that the God that you serve is his ways are higher than our ways. Yeah. His thoughts are higher than our own. And he loves you and he cares for you and he's doing something in your life that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
And I think there's just so much encouragement in that God is working in the present. And he wants us to be there. He wants us to be where the stage of life where we're at, because there's so much beauty in the present.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you guys for joining in on this episode. It's been so much fun hanging out with you guys. Listen to the StudentCast. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, like, share, subscribe.
Yep.
That way we can keep spreading the news about the WellCast to everybody.
Absolutely. 5 stars all the way.
5 stars. Yeah, rate it.
Yeah, 5 stars.
Do that.
We need that.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the WellCast. As always, don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends about us. For more information about the Well Community Church, visit thewellcommunity.org.